Hello, this is Mr. Shields again, back with another video. This is part 2, dealing with the quadratic formula. So in the previous examples that we went over, you'll remember, hopefully, that our answers came out pretty nice and neat here. So if I take a look at the first example we did in the last video, we ended up with two whole numbers here, -4 and 9. And then also in the next example, we had 10 and -2. But what happens if things aren't so nice and neat? Well, that's when it's going to involve a little bit of work on our part. So there are 8 questions that you're going to have to do for lesson 5. And so what you're going to need to do is be sure to show your work. But in this video, I'm actually going to do the 2 of the problems for you, so that way you're only going to have 6 left to do. Plus, I'm going to give you a hint on number 7 as well. So let's take a look here at our first example here today. So number 4. So the first thing I need to do before I can use my quadratic formula, I need to make sure that I have my ABCs lined up equal to 0. So if I look at number 4, I have them, all 3 of them set equal to 0. And so I can go ahead and begin. So let's go ahead and get started with this example. So step 1, make sure you label your ABCs. So if I take a look at A here, looks like that's going to be 2. B is going to be -3. And then lastly here, C is going to equal -5. All right, once I have that established, and let me go ahead and get the focus right on this camera here. Once I have that established, I can go ahead and plug it into the formula. So I'm going to have x equals, so I have -b. So in this case, I already have a negative number, but I'm going to still have 2 negatives here. So that's why it's very, very important to put that in parentheses, because if you just write -3 here, that's going to be a bit of a problem. So there's a -b here, regardless of whether or not this is positive or a -b. So keep that in mind. Plus or minus the square root of b squared. So in this case, we're going to have a -3 squared minus my 4ac. My a is 2. And I'll try to squeeze the c in here, -5. All right, just barely, just barely. Wanted to try to use the same paper here to see if I couldn't squeeze that in. So we'll see how this works out, okay? And then, of course, we have to deal with the denominator. So 2 times a, in this case, a is 2. So let's go ahead and deal with the numerator first in terms of simplification. Negative times negative gives me a +3, and that's plus or minus. And then we're going to have to deal with what's in that radical sign here. So I'm going to go ahead and take that -3. Let me clear this out here. I'm going to have -3 squared, which is just 9. So I'm going to have 9. Then I go put in my -4, parentheses 2, parentheses -5. And then I'll end up with a 40 here. So plus 40. Okay. All underneath 2 times 2, which is 4. So we can go ahead and continue to simplify this a little bit further, and you can probably guess 9 plus 40 is going to be 49. And 49 is a special number, obviously. And so when I go ahead and continue to simplify this, the square root of 49 is just 7. So I'm going to move up here so I have a little bit more space here. So I'm going to have x equals 3 plus or minus, that's 7 now, divided by 4. Okay? So once again, I can split this apart into 2's. So I'll have 3 plus 7 over 4, and I'll have 3 minus 7 over 4. Now, what you're going to notice is we're actually going to get a fraction for one of these. So when we go ahead and break this apart, we have 3, or actually put it together. 3 plus 7, we're going to get 10 over 4. All right, so 10 over 4, we can reduce that fraction to 5 over 2. If you want to write it as a decimal, that's fine. I don't care. So we got 5 over 2 as we reduce that. 3 minus 4, that's just going to be -4 over 4. We can reduce that to a -1. All right, so x is going to equal 5 over 2 and -1 for that particular problem here. All right, so you can have a fraction as an answer, so don't be afraid if that's one of your answers. So I want to go on down to number 8 because this one is kind of special here. If we take a look at number 8, you'll notice that it's not totally ready to go here. So if I look at my quadratic equation here for a second while this thing refocuses, you will see that I have a -10 over here, and I need that to be a 0. So I'm going to have to move that -10 over to the left-hand side. Now, how am I going to move that -10 over to the left-hand side? Well, I'm going to do the inverse. So it's already negative, so I'm going to add 10 over here, add 10, and then I'm really good to go. So I'm going to have 2m squared minus 7m, and then we'll get a -3 equals 0. Now we can go about the process of doing our ABCs because now that it's set equal to 0. All right, so A is going to equal 2, B is going to equal -7, and C will equal -3. And then I can go ahead and put it into the formula. So x equals negative, so that B is going to be a -7 here. So I'll have -7 plus or minus. Let's see if I can squeeze this one in here. This is going to be a challenge. So I'm going to have a -7 squared for my B, and then -4 parentheses. I don't think I'm going to get them all the way here. So I have 2, and then that's going to be multiplied by the -3 here. So didn't quite get it all in there like I did in the previous problem, but oh well. So once we go ahead to our next step, get my calculator ready here. I need to go ahead and deal with that denominator here. Okay, so the denominator, I'm going to have 2 parentheses. Looks like my A is 2. Okay, now we can go do our x equals. We'll have a -7 plus or minus. So when we take a look in the square root, that is a -7 squared. So put that in parentheses, -7 squared, and I will get a 49. Great. And then the other part of it, -4, or -4, parentheses 2, close that parentheses, I'm going to get -3, and I'm going to end up with a positive 24. Okay? And then when I go ahead and simplify my denominator, 2 times 2, I'm going to end up with a 4. Now, let's take a look at this. When I add 49 and 24, I'm going to end up with a 73. Now, is 73 a perfect square? No, it's not a perfect square. Now, how am I going to write my final answer? Well, I could reduce this to a decimal. And if I did that in my calculator, the square root of 73, that would give me a decimal 8.54. But for this particular assignment, you don't have to do that. What am I looking for? Well, we can actually just split this apart, okay? So we can just do -7 plus the square root of 73 over 4 is one of my answers. And then my other answer is just -7 minus the square root of 73 over 4. And we can just keep it like that, okay? So for this assignment, I really just want you guys to get practice using the quadratic formula so you don't have to break it down all the way necessarily. If you can get to this part, I'm totally fine. Now, I said I was going to give you a little bit of a hint for number 7, but that hint should be pretty obvious. Take a look at what we did in number 8, okay? So we wanted to make sure this was set equal to 0, but we had another number there. But if I look at number 7, you're going to see that I have a 4 here, a positive 4. How am I going to go ahead and get that positive 4 over here? Well, all I need to do is subtract. So I'm just going to subtract 4 and subtract 4. So what is my new equation going to be? It will be 4b squared plus 8b plus 3 equals 0. Now I can go ahead and use my quadratic formula to go ahead and solve that problem. Okay, so if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to myself or Ms. Watkins during our respective office hours, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.